It's not that all lives don't matter, but right now, our lives matter. Black lives matter.
Yes.
Black trans lives matter.
Yes.
Trans lives matter.
Yes.
Because guess what? We all minorities, but right now, like, let's focus on the person who got killed. Tony McDade was a black trans man.
Both women were found dead at the home of Aaron Glee off of Monday Road in Tallahassee 1 year ago today. Glee is suspected of kidnapping and murdering Sims and Salau, and now friends are trying to figure out how to live their lives without the ones they love.
A young activist fighting for justice becomes the victim of a horrific crime. Oluwatoyin Salau, just 19 years old, dedicated her life to standing up for others, yet her own cries for help were tragically ignored. This is the heartbreaking story of Oluwatoyin Salau, a voice silenced too soon. Oluwatoyin Salau was a young woman who embodied resilience and courage in the face of adversity. Born to Nigerian immigrant parents in Florida, Toyin grew up navigating the intersections of her identity as a black woman and a child of immigrants in the United States. Her upbringing shaped her perspective on justice, fairness, and the importance of standing up for marginalized communities. Toyin's passion for activism emerged at a young age, and by her late teens, she had become a prominent voice in the fight against police brutality and systemic racism. She regularly attended protests in Tallahassee, Florida, lending her voice to the Black Lives Matter movement. Toyin's words were powerful and unflinching, often calling out injustices with a raw honesty that resonated deeply with those who heard her speak.
We doing this for him. We doing this for our brothers and our sisters who got shot, but we doing this for every black person. Because at the end of the day, I cannot take my fucking skin color off. I cannot mask this shit, okay? Everywhere I fucking go, I'm profiled whether I like it or not.
Her fearless commitment to justice made her a symbol of hope and resilience in her community. While her activism was inspiring, Toyin's personal life was marked by significant struggles. She faced homelessness, a reality that made her advocacy for systemic change all the more urgent and personal. Living without a stable home meant she often relied on public spaces, shelters, or the kindness of acquaintances to find a place to sleep. Despite the instability in her life, Toyin continued to fight for justice, showing a determination that underscored her strength of character. Toyin's advocacy wasn't just limited to public protests. She used her personal experiences to shed light on the injustices faced by vulnerable populations, particularly black women and those experiencing homelessness. Her ability to connect her struggles to broader systemic issues demonstrated a depth of understanding and compassion that belied her young age. For Toyin, activism wasn't just about raising her voice. It was about ensuring that others who faced similar challenges could find safety and justice. In addition to her activism, Toyin was known for her vibrant personality and unwavering belief in the possibility of change. Those who knew her described her as intelligent, passionate, and driven, with an infectious energy that inspired those around her. Even in the face of adversity, Toyin exuded a strength that made her a role model for many young people in her community.
This shit, I can't take this shit off, so guess what? I'ma die about it.
Yes.
I'ma die about my fucking skin. You cannot take my fucking blackness away from me. My blackness is not for your fucking consumption, nigga. It's not. It's not.
However, her courage and dedication also made her vulnerable. The very public nature of her activism, combined with her lack of a stable support system, left Toyin exposed to the dangers of violence and exploitation. She often spoke openly about her struggles and fears, making her pleas for help all the more heartbreaking in hindsight. Oluwatoyin Salau was more than just an activist. She was a young woman with dreams, a fiery passion for justice, and a heart full of hope for a better world. Her life and work were a testament to the power of standing up for what is right, even when facing overwhelming odds. Despite her untimely death, her legacy continues to inspire conversations about systemic change, the vulnerabilities faced by Black women, and the urgent need to protect those who dedicate their lives to justice. On June 6, 2020, Oluwatoyin Salau shared a series of deeply troubling tweets that would tragically become her last public messages. In these posts, Toyin revealed that she had been sexually assaulted earlier that day by a man who had offered her a ride. Her tweets detailed the traumatic event and the heartbreaking circumstances that led to it. Toyin explained that she had been seeking refuge at a church due to her ongoing struggles with homelessness. In a vulnerable moment, She accepted the offer of help from a man who claimed he would drive her to safety. However, instead of protecting her, he took advantage of her trust and assaulted her. The tweets captured the raw pain and betrayal Toyin felt after the attack. She described her anguish and fear, pleading for support and safety. Her words revealed not just her suffering, but also the systemic vulnerabilities faced by women like her, young, homeless, and black, who are often left unprotected by society. The tweets resonated deeply with those who read them, leaving many shocked and heartbroken by her story. Shortly after posting about the assault, Toyin disappeared.
Trish Brown met 19-year-old Salau through Black Lives Matter activism and says, like Sims, she had a heart for bringing change to the community she called home.
She was very independent, very strong when it came down to being a BLM leader in the community.
Salau's friends also holding a candlelight vigil to honor Salau's dedication to social issues at the state capitol on Friday.
Her sudden silence alarmed her friends, family, and the activist community. Toyin was known for her consistent presence at protests and on social media, so her absence was quickly noticed. Her loved ones immediately reported her missing to the authorities and launched a widespread search effort. Flyers were distributed, social media campaigns were organized, and members of the community worked tirelessly to find her. The urgency to locate Toyin grew as the days passed. Activists and local organizations joined forces, holding rallies and search parties to bring attention to her disappearance. The hashtag number Justice for Toyin began trending on social media as people from across the country expressed their concern and solidarity. Many were struck by the cruel irony of Toyin, an activist who had devoted her life to fighting for justice, becoming a victim of the very violence she sought to eradicate. As days turned into a week, the hopes of finding Toyin alive began to fade. On June 13, 2020, those fears were confirmed when authorities discovered Toyin's body, alongside that of 75-year-old Victoria Sims, a local volunteer and community advocate. The two women were found near the home of Aaron Glee Jr., a man who was later charged with their murders. The news devastated those who had been searching for Toyin, and the community was left grappling with the loss of a young, promising activist. The events leading up to Toyin's death highlighted the dangers faced by vulnerable individuals, particularly those like Toyin who live without stable housing or support systems. Her story also underscored the lack of adequate resources and protection for women who experience violence. Despite her pleas for help, the systems that should have safeguarded her failed to do so, leaving her exposed to unimaginable harm. Toyin's disappearance and subsequent death sent shockwaves across the country. Her story became a tragic symbol of the intersecting issues of racism, gender-based violence, and systemic neglect, igniting conversations about how society can better protect those most at risk. On June 13, 2020, after days of desperate searching, the bodies of 19-year-old Oluwatoyin Salau and 75-year-old Victoria Sims were discovered near the residence of Aaron Glee Jr. in Tallahassee, Florida. The tragic discovery confirmed the community's worst fears, marking the devastating end of the search for Toyin, a young activist whose voice had been silenced.
Both women were found dead at the home of Aaron Glee off of Monday Road in Tallahassee 1 year ago today. Glee is suspected of kidnapping and murdering Sims and Salau, and now friends are trying to figure out how to live their lives without the ones they love.
The revelation also brought to light the loss of Victoria Sims, a dedicated community volunteer known for her generosity and commitment to helping others. Toyin and Sims were found near Glee's home, a location that had come under investigation after Glee himself was linked to Sims' disappearance. Sims, a retired state worker and an active member of the local community, had been reported missing days earlier when she failed to show up for a volunteer commitment. Her absence, much like Toyin's, had alarmed those who knew her, prompting a search that eventually led authorities to Glee's residence. Upon his arrest, Aaron Glee Jr. confessed to both murders. The details that emerged were chilling. According to investigators, Glee had lured Toyin to his home under the pretense of offering her help. Once there, he reportedly held her captive, assaulted her, and eventually took her life. His actions were not isolated. Glee also targeted Victoria Sims, reportedly killing her after stealing her car and personal belongings. The discovery of the two women's bodies and the subsequent investigation painted a horrifying picture of Glee's crimes. Toyin's tragic fate, in particular, was compounded by the fact that she had been vocal about her struggles and the assault she experienced just days before her death. Her plea for safety and justice had gone unanswered, leaving her vulnerable to further harm. Victoria Sims' murder further emphasized the indiscriminate nature of Glee's violence. Sims, a woman who had spent her life giving back to her community, was tragically victimized while trying to help others. Her death, alongside Toyin's, highlighted the wide-reaching impact of Glee's actions and the need for greater protection for vulnerable individuals, regardless of age or circumstances.
The quiet, peaceful demeanor that I saw on her and the desire to be of service and to help other people.
The community's response to the discovery was one of profound grief and anger. Toyin's fellow activists, friends, and supporters were devastated by the loss of such a bright and passionate young woman. Similarly,
the parents and family of 19-year-old Salau grieving the loss of their daughter and loved one. People filling the sanctuary honoring her Nigerian roots and spiritual background. Her program documenting photos of her at all stages of life. Words of comfort from her pastor, friends, and former teachers expressed just how special Salau was to them, and parts of her others may not have known.
Sims's friends and family mourned the loss of a kind-hearted individual who had dedicated her life to service. Together, their deaths became a rallying point for conversations about systemic failures, violence against women, and the need for better support systems. Glee's arrest and confession brought some measure of clarity, but the pain of the loss lingered. Both Toyin and Sims had been taken far too soon, their lives cut short by senseless violence. The discovery of their bodies marked the end of one chapter but opened another, a fight for justice, accountability, and a deeper reckoning with the systems that had failed to protect them. This tragic case remains a stark reminder of the vulnerabilities faced by women, particularly those who are marginalized or actively working to create change. The discovery of Toyin and Sims's bodies underscored the urgent need for stronger measures to ensure the safety and well-being of all individuals, especially those who are most at risk. Aaron Glee Jr. was a man with a long history of violence and criminal behavior, which made his actions leading to the deaths of Oluwatoyin Salau and Victoria Sims tragically unsurprising to those familiar with his past. Glee's criminal record painted a troubling picture of a man who had been given multiple chances by the justice system, despite clear evidence of his violent tendencies. Glee had been arrested several times before these horrific murders. His prior charges included aggravated battery, assault, and other violent offenses. These incidents revealed a pattern of aggression and disregard for the safety of others. In one notable case, Glee was accused of violently attacking another person, a crime that should have raised alarms about his potential danger to society. However, like many cases of repeat offenders, the consequences he faced did little to prevent him from continuing down this destructive path. In the weeks leading up to Toyin's death, Glee was once again arrested. This time, the charges included aggravated battery. Despite the severity of these charges, Glee was released from custody. The decision to release him, rather than holding him accountable or providing intervention, proved to be a critical failure of the justice system. This release not only allowed Glee to evade punishment for his prior actions, but also enabled him to commit the brutal crimes that would end the lives of Toyin and Sims. The failures of the system extended beyond Glee's release. His repeated arrests and violent behavior highlighted systemic issues in addressing individuals who exhibit a clear pattern of harm to others. While the justice system often focuses on punishment, it rarely addresses the root causes of violent behavior or takes adequate measures to prevent further harm. In Glee's case, this oversight had devastating consequences. For people like Toyin Salau and Victoria Sims, the justice system's inability to protect them became a matter of life and death. Toyin, who had already experienced significant trauma, was left vulnerable to Glee's predatory behavior. Victoria, known for her kindness and commitment to helping others, became another victim of Glee's unchecked violence. The system that should have safeguarded these women failed to recognize and act upon the clear warning signs presented by Glee's past. Glee's actions revealed not only his own cruelty, but also the dangers posed by systemic negligence. The fact that he was free to continue his violent behavior after multiple arrests raises critical questions about accountability and prevention. How many more lives could have been affected by Glee if he had not been caught after the murders of Toyin and Sims? And how many others like him exist, slipping through the cracks of a flawed system? In the aftermath of these tragedies, the focus turned to addressing the failures that allowed Glee to roam freely despite his history. Advocates called for reforms to ensure that individuals with violent pasts are held accountable and that vulnerable populations are better protected. The lives of Toyin and Sims could not be brought back, but their deaths served as a stark reminder of the urgent need for systemic change. Glee's story is not just one of individual violence, but also of a justice system that must do more to prevent such tragedies from happening again. The news of Oluwatoyin Salau's death reverberated across the country, sparking an outpouring of grief, anger, and calls for justice. Toyin's life, and the tragic circumstances surrounding her death, struck a chord with people from all walks of life. The hashtag number Justice for Toyin began trending on social media platforms as individuals demanded accountability for her murder and highlighted the broader systemic issues that allowed her to fall through the cracks. Toyin's story resonated deeply because it underscored the unique vulnerabilities faced by Black women, particularly those experiencing homelessness or engaged in activism. As a young woman, she had publicly shared her experiences of assault and her pleas for safety, yet the support systems she needed to protect her were absent. Her case shed light on how systemic neglect can leave individuals like Toyin unprotected, even when they bravely speak out about their struggles.
Salau was last seen June 6th. Police say she called them that same day to report a sexual assault. Her family reported her missing shortly after. TPD says a team of more than a dozen investigators reached out to people who may have known her and checked the places she may have been, but came up short.
The public mourning for Toyin went beyond the loss of a single life. It became a collective reckoning with the failures of society to provide safety and justice for those most in need. Her death highlighted how issues of race, gender, and economic instability intersect to create dangerous realities for marginalized individuals. Vigils were held in her honor, and her name became a rallying cry for reform, particularly in addressing the challenges faced by Black women and the need for stronger protections for survivors of violence. Following the discovery of Toyin's and Victoria Sims' bodies, authorities arrested Aaron Glee Jr. and charged him with multiple offenses, including kidnapping, sexual assault, and murder. The evidence against Glee was overwhelming, and his own confession further solidified his culpability. However, the legal process that followed was a difficult journey for the families of both victims, as well as the communities mourning their loss. Initially, Glee rejected a plea deal that would have resulted in a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. For many, his rejection of the deal was seen as a continuation of his disregard for accountability and justice. The legal proceedings dragged on, prolonging the pain for those seeking closure. In January 2023, Glee finally pleaded guilty to the charges against him. This decision was reportedly motivated by his desire to avoid the death penalty, which was a potential outcome if the case had gone to trial. By pleading guilty, Glee admitted to the heinous acts he had committed, and the court moved forward with sentencing. In September 2023, Aaron Glee Jr. was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. For the families of Toyin and Sims, as well as their supporters, the sentencing brought some measure of justice. Glee would no longer be able to harm others.
I checked court documents that show Glee confessed to the killings. Friday, he was sentenced to life in prison for 2 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of kidnapping. Glee also received 15 years for sexual battery and 5 for felony battery.
And he would spend the rest of his life behind bars. However, while the legal process provided some closure, it could not erase the deep pain caused by his actions or address the systemic failures that contributed to the tragedy. Toyin's death and the subsequent trial became a stark reminder of the urgent need for systemic reforms. While Glee's sentencing ensured that he would be held accountable, it also underscored the need for greater protections for vulnerable populations and survivors of violence. Toyin's legacy lives on as a call to action to create a world where voices like hers are heard and supported before it's too late. Oluwatoyin Salau's story is not just a heartbreaking tragedy, it is a powerful call to action. As a young activist, Toyin dedicated her life to the fight for justice, courageously raising her voice against systemic racism and police brutality. In her death, Toyin's story has come to symbolize the urgent need to address the dangers faced by Black women and activists, particularly those who are marginalized and vulnerable. Toyin's life highlighted critical systemic issues, including the intersection of race, gender, and economic instability. Her experiences of homelessness and violence underscored the failures of societal structures meant to provide safety and support. Her death has prompted conversations about how these systems must be reformed to prevent others from suffering the same fate. On June 28, 2020, Toyin's funeral was held, and she was remembered as a fearless and passionate young woman. Those who knew her spoke of her unwavering commitment to justice, even in the face of her personal struggles. Her community mourned not only the loss of a bright future, but also the silencing of a voice that had already inspired so many. Toyin's legacy lives on through the activism she championed. Her death has mobilized calls for systemic change, with advocates working to ensure that the vulnerable are better protected and that survivors of violence receive the support they need. Her story serves as a reminder of the resilience and bravery of Black women, while emphasizing the importance of addressing the societal failures that disproportionately affect them. Toyin's voice may no longer be heard in protests, but her memory continues to inspire action. Her life and her courage demand that we build a world where no one's cries for justice go unanswered. Oluwatoyin Salau's life was a testament to resilience and bravery. She stood up for what she believed in, even in the face of immense personal challenges. Her tragic death reminds us of the work that still needs to be done to protect those who fight for justice and equality. Her voice may have been silenced, but her legacy lives on. Let Toyin's story inspire us to create a world where no one's cries for help go unanswered.